Hello, Americans. This video is about programming. For the way nature is teaching things up additionally, hyper additionally, with what we know about programming, and they have left what is hyper additional left out. All informal and formal logics aren't experts, and or this is relevant to where and to how the short words are prevented. Uh, their protraction and or when they are not, they are forcing nature as as short words. For example, nature has sequence value treatments, premises treatments, what they call facts. All quality aspects in nature of fact treating nature have remained criminal insidiousness as negative treatments to counter negatives syntactically and as positive treatments and to counter positive treatments as criminal insidiousness nature. Whether there's a positive or negative treatment, there is an identity treatment. So the nature uses what a worm is, how there are types of worms to show us things smaller than the worm. There is one way we could have a complete accordance. We could have complete accordance with the identity that is the order of the finite, the smallest finite detail of our species body individual. Why we, as a species body of volume together, it is a whole bunch of individuals. One identity of volume can only make more of itself through a non-integrity of itself, but one way. In other words, and increasingly, but this is with Earth's a special difference nature, so I'm cutting ahead. Some of the worms are programmed by nature to walk into bodies of water. See, but we don't want this is getting harder and harder to discern certain ways, while simultaneously it is getting easier and easier to discern simultaneously. There is not only an identity of simultaneous, that is not the identity of relativity, but it as itself, it is simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. And its hyper simultaneous identity as volume, inseparable from all other volumes. Therefore, all other volumes, there is no volume that is not that is one by itself. And the ancients revealed English. If you read the nature of English itself as the guide to itself, and we'll examine how conceived as expertise on English definitions of English grammar as parts, individually grouped in together, and regular dictionaries, how they have this distinctly, not distinctly, and hyper simultaneously, where correct and where wrong, both as collusions, where how left out again are the hyper additional demonstrations to us by nature for how nature actually works with logic. For example, so everyone should know the answer to if just when someone uses short words logic, regardless of what color they are too, because we have black pupils and white slash whites of eye. So the second we discern, we are communicated to that a breaching method applied. Black pupils, whites of eye, enrolls with the interbranch, enrolls with overtly criminally foreign influence private economic position, identities of jobs, juxtaposed with identity of law and the branches of government are manifest because nature has it that way. Nature has the members of the branches of government hyper additionally automatically positive to itself as each of the species itself. It's why each of the species share how there's individual group differences, including sexes. Honesty has not spoken for little boys and little girls of relative to the employments of the tactically denatured ground before our feet. That the breaching method force while we're sustaining against every difference natural. The reason that some countries have native populations is because each country individually grouped and together was forced, hurt, tricked, and persuaded to become a name that or to use a name as above locations, areas, and states, and to force roles with uses of that name now tactically ulterior from how nature has us wanted and needed to use our names as individuals grouped and together. Also, that way distinctly from the other ways, that way being locations, areas, and states. That is a trinity bound because of the extent of itself. In other words, we could discern the extent of ourself that is gone, but it is still here, but it is not. And we know that what is to come to an extent. We don't know that, in other words, oh, I knew I was living. In other words, I know a second from now I'll be living. I was right. I could have been wrong. You know what I'm saying? But in other words, we know to an extent. If we appreciate those three extents properly, they come with two additional ones too, hyper additional. The value of truth before the order of the sequence. A human fact, human nature breaching method conceived semi ancient nations, semi ancient countries, all locations, areas, and states, everywhere the species body is. See, those words are not just because our system formally uses those words, not just our republic is tactically re engineered, criminally re engineered, slash tactically hyper criminally re engineered, because it maintained this through ourselves, everywhere the species body is, a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise that demonstrably more probably to increasingly than what is formally and informally convicted, opine, theorize regarding history and where and how it has relevance to what is active, how to discern the integrity of what is active now. Honesty was capable. There pretend other, but there are means to prove that. See, we have people offensively show needs to prove things and have people defend that, like January 6th. All January 6th treatments in both sides of it. And the difference, the exceptions have common things. They leave out their identities of logic that can't defend themselves and afford their identity of sophistication slash hyper sophistication necessary to counter the roles of criminal foreign influences slash hyper criminal foreign influences. Again, there was a breaching method that was the sum of the laws of of the sciences. Syntactically, convictions were made and are made from them. People want to debate the integrity of the voices of the sciences because of how they are victim slash hyper victim, as everyone is A through Z relative to this, blaming other things, others, or on self. The real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures per worse uses of it that everyone missed. This thing was a hyper sophistication here, as nature is a hyper sophistication. as nature would continually to demonstrate the existence of the breaching method and maintenance of it. It means by qualities, aspect, nature, as criminal says, nature, positive treatments, negative treatments, and identity treatments, therefore names treatments. So the nature has the worm programmed to walk into bodies of water. Those of us from the suburbs or from cities where there are still lawns, they might remember back when it used to rain, they used to walk into the puddles. For a long time, humanity has been chopping up the grass, throwing it away, putting the leaves away. This breaching method, designed for torture and slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies, what it forced to be entrenched because it was everything was designed for if someone way beyond the extent needed to do what they needed to do too. Anyone tried to make an identity of unity or of independence, that would be syntactically manifest, ulterior from what could only be manifest at interbranch locations where they have names, voices, at the community store where they have voices, while things like slavery are being entertained and effectively used to measure and maintain that it was a slavery and is a slavery method against every single body, including the countries A through Z. Rather than rather than admit this as it is actually recorded, we have people who pretend faith, passions, and emotions using words like crime, where and how it is necessary to discern what is actually recorded, where they have crime, where the truth you have, crime, you could one way you can measure it is through business. The people are the businesses are allowed to have freedom, but you can't get that correct until you have the people separated from the facts, predicate, acts, method slash s. This is relative to where Fox News and CNN and MSNBC distinctly, not distinctly, and hyper simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously. They have the appearance of difference. They have the reality of difference and the reality shared. Now, as victims slash hyper victims, ulterior, tactical ulterior from how nature has that. With California treatments of, and with cities treatments of crime onto businesses will never be able, a human voice won't be able to make proper treatments with that and with distinction. I mean, with exception, with exception nature, until addressed is the predicate acts methods against every campus and every voice of the cities, sickly distinctly from the suburbs that were designed for torture and slavery before our founders were born, that were designed to force everyone reliant upon food from other locations, to force everyone rolls with a breaching method, to force everyone rolls with things like that and worse that would cause negative value in every nature progressions, acts, and nature and names, effectively to measure and maintain self-valued defenses of uses of those names, leaving out the foreign names involvements. And the same thing there, because they are used remotely, individually grouped in together. The help of the presidents, both parties, the presidents past and to come, they are distinctly, all locations, areas, and states, fact, treatment, nature, qualities, aspects, and natures already had of uses of words like all the emotions. If honesty spoke for the sciences, The emotions are about the simultaneous slash hyper-simultaneous. They are about ratiocination slash pseudo-ratiocination and or pseudo-ratiocination slash ratiocination. Because there is an identity of possession to the consciousness that even the bugs share. Even the animal, if you have a pet, it's easier to discern. There is a shared consciousness, reality of, awareness of reality, and those three identities of time. An honest appreciation them reveals that there are two hyper additional identities of time. Where one identity of forever nature is an only increasing identity of volume, and with all exceptions in exception nature, in demonstration of the same thing, while being in demonstration with exception and exception nature, is used for not just by its identity, but by our own, as its identities plural. Just as all identities of your body have a semi nature relationship to your singular identity. Don't forget our singular identity. That's part of the reason we can discern. Not just does it have a semi nature relationship to the species volume, which is an extent of power slash might. That like this, we come with intellectual agreements. We come with location agreements everywhere the location body is. We have to admit that and how the semi-ancient breaching method, what is actually reported, but where and how this is reported is also where and how it is denied, and where and how that is defended. There is a means to appreciate criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, quality aspect and fact treatment nature. Qualities, aspects, and fact treatment nature itself as criminal instances with positive treatment, not just negative. There are means to discern with honesty. Everywhere there's a positive or negative treatment, it's about identity. See, they have their sexual differences interbranch, used effectively. Self-value, where and how there are types of those natural, all our natural difference, black pupil, whites of eye, slash whites of eye. All those differences that the law was supposed to address, how a breaching method applied them used to measure and maintain roles with it. Roles with also the summary of the law was everyone was forced to pretend they were about free speech, pretend they're about integrity of premises treatments, um, exceptions treatments. New York City is designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures while pretending other. And while that being used to screen the breaching method's roles with every identity of sophistication slash hyper sophistication, which is only an extent. But now it is an extent maintained, discerned only through and as identities of dealing with known, with things known, unknown. Quote, the intelligence community regarding and using MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN sources, but also using Connecticut news media, also leading up to the World Trade Center attack with all the nations involved, their family members, ones having nothing to do with them, where and how the identities of our countries individually grouped in together. There are means to discern conscious remote uses of it since semi-ancient times. This just reminds. So self-valued collusions, where people are going to speak for the law anyway. See, this gets away with it needs people that are overt criminal enterprises involvement still, private ones. You know, honesty never spoke for New York City. It is easier to discern it there, some ways. only, because everything to discern it properly is about the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. This is a breaching method that recorded effectively gets judges to speak fake things, to lie about their passions and emotions into records and about their motivations for that, distinctly from the executive branch, distinctly from the private criminal enterprises' names, their family members, from the overt ones, plural. There are timed uses of them where there is that breaching method singular use of all location slash s and all database relationships increasingly for how juxtaposed with that as uses of all location slash s. It came with first a first hyper use slash s of all location slash s. So these words like programming, they came from ancient times. So obviously, if you have healthy soils, in other words, nature shows that its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing hyper value of that as volume. It is discernible by being a hyper invisible, but still distinctly to an extent discernible, to an extent slash s that comes with a method of contemplation to discern more from there. But you have to. This is as an individual. Prayer was first a different meaning and or meanings simultaneously too are made where they appear to be expanding the definitions of things like programming. They've been taken away from it. Programming is mimicking use of the phenomenon of how five distinct identities of sequence slash simultaneous nature are three distinct identities of simultaneous nature. A sequence nature is distinct. Being an individual is being a sequence nature as being a simultaneous nature. Being group differences, ages, areas, sexes. The other species bodies have this too. It's electrical engineering. Its identity, each identity of volume has a distinct identity relationship to itself. So imagine the reason the worms walk into the water. Now there is a constant supply of food, not just for the earth. When the earth, the faster compost piles, the longer they go, the faster they go. The earth used to be this way. The earth shows us what's going to cause positive or negative value nature progression, distinctly from how positive and negative and identity is spoken about. And so distinctly from how is afforded. No one can afford to have appreciated this for a method that also knew that nature would demonstrate that. So it preemptively invested a whole bunch of needs in natures additionally to the record. No, you know, overtly slash insidiously simultaneously possessed and used remotely. Logic, syntax, identities, names, nature. Regarding the issues that where debate is pretended value, honestly, like if New Yorkers are free, if people of the suburbs are, even the people of the suburbs are reliant upon mass farming. So you have wars with Ukraine, people dying in Ukraine, people Russians dying, Americans dying. It's connected to where we have, you know, worse than torture, slavery still affected. In other words, and that pretended that's not debatable. Anyone who's going to debate that New Yorkers are tortured and slavery and enslaved still is going to have inherent active progressive to their quality aspect and fact shooting nature. And see, while and if we don't allow individuals to address this, the locations, areas, and states, and the help of presidents and the exceptions will stay, needing to hide how their volume was already used remotely. And see, the more that then they'll use when they understand this, because this is locked in where everyone speaks through others, and replaced is what is actually recorded. And or when that's not the instance is recorded, and what is relevant is conscious uses of the exception nature to hide criminal foreign influences and uses of those names here and there as one fake side slash s. They never had independence. They never had a unity that wasn't criminal insidiousness. They are bound as individuals grouped and together, including our country, as uses of names tactical ulterior from how nature reveals the individual grouped and together to be used, but how it answers our questions. Why we have black pupils, whites of eyes. Why and how. Why did the colonists in the early states have and leave entrenched? Roles with uses also used singularly by a breaching method of laws and imposition, tortures, and slavery of themselves. All exceptions, exception nature too, used to screen the real causes and uses of that worse and more finite. So simultaneous, while it's worse, it's seeming less with instances. People's uses of words like behavior, like facts. Connecticut news media locations also with names next to them have roles with predicate acts with facts and with their emotions and behind it and their motivations narratives and how that looks real and where how even where it is real that is consciously employed and having been employed behind, in other words, people don't want to hurt their kids, but they are shown needs and means. In other words, if you have to lie for your kids, you're the only one, they've been lying into branch because we left out how they were roles too. It's not just the North American, no, I mean Northern Atlantic slave trade. It was greater than and more finite. It is the slavery of our founders in our face too, overtly slash insidiously. And anyone who tries to treat that properly has the phenomena of everyone already having invested themselves pretending to be able to speak for the law with passions, honestly. Passions and emotions are about the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. And or people are fake, as was the breaching method new. That's one of the ways it measures and maintains the sacred identities, cheap fakes, as you know, and that's A through Z, though. Everyone wants to blame other things others are self, only to keep a quality of fact, keeping nature that is preventing the revelations slash hyper revelations that come from when we connect and use consciously truths that are not used for lies, truths that can't be used for lies. Those are a nature of truths that bring revelations. There is a reason for this. Even the animals, everyone's all the whole system's messed up though now. Everyone's paranoid where we shouldn't be, and or simultaneously not paranoid where we shouldn't be. The ancients knew how to cause positive value nature progressions, acts in nature. They didn't employ things and people when there was no need for employments. It wasn't until the sciences became criminally foreign influence and how they became criminally foreign influence. is more probably demonstrably by how a criminal enterprise in some ancient times knew it was going to get caught and it ahead of time, and it figured out a way. The only way it could get not caught is to do crazy, bad, evil things to force people to respond as factory nature, not knowing how to respond properly, but needing to use power and might of humanity and of the ancient republic and of its campus in the sciences. It took them to defenses of themselves abridged, blaming other things, others, or selves, where a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise was conceived, and that which was supposed to be correctly blamed. And before that, the regular criminal enterprise, international, and or the location, area, and state of one of the countries. But that would be that had to come where it was already getting messed up, where they were already in a negative out. See, it's all right as long as if we get things wrong when we're all on the same page, not just because we're on the same page. We're all on the same page, being led by that, which is hyper additionally two ways, two additional identities of time. Prepare your mind. The value of sequence true before the smallest order finite detail of the republic now in its modern form. Slash S, there are other republics. The reason the ancient, this is also hyperpantheism. The religions as formally defined, there are applications by them where and how they've been preventing people free speech and getting away with it on the mass scale and or that person's sense. It is recorded how that could be motivated, maintained motivated, and that gotten away with it. It's not for the known blamed excuses. You have to follow where and how. The significance of how we have black pupils, white survives. Simultaneously with where and how the breaching method, how we have all these means to discern a breaching method applied to laws individually grouped it together to measure and maintain roles with it. Nature's as it, they can't defend themselves. And for defenses of their anything they said or are. See, criminal insidiousness made this self value. And it comes up when people try to report things properly. Because also how preemptively they use tricks with facts. They have people tell on others for fake things, sticking things in databases, including in campuses from off them. And there's uses of this through time increasingly connected. As the people leading up to the World Trade Center attacks since they were kids, as our side with the whole other side, and since with hiding it. In other words, they have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes, the people, and the branches of government, and the difference between that. We have to be led by the hyper invisible. So, in Connecticut, Interbranch has been switching names to prevent this, as their roles with extortion methods. We're going to call it. We're not going to focus on the roles with the slavery, because then we'll get to blaming people wrong as one of the things they do and did already. That is one of the things that are used to show them means for others to discern this, that they have to hide by self-valuing roles, needs, and natures already at all the locations where there are databases, and the difference between that and how they are at all the places with campuses, and the difference with that with where and how fire campuses and medical campuses are all also campuses. The function slash S by the campuses system, Campus Marcias, It's not just the name of a park in Detroit. In other words, the Republic and its campus Marseille system. It is an identity of electrical engineering by this identity of volume that works with the ground and its identity of relation to itself and the only increasing value of that as identities volume too, the same way computers work, but also hyper-additionally two ways. So they want and need debates like this with names calling. They want them to, each of the sciences, certain type of victim slash hyper victim, experts on soil, left out the importance of being able to discern. If worms are in the soil, it's healthy. It's using positive and negative per nature system. If you buy it from a store for the reason it's you can't tell. We can't follow. We can't be led by the hyper invisible. For too long, there's a problem with the worm population. That means there's a problem for the birds. It means there are more bugs. You know, what causes positive or negative? That means the food chain is missing its identity relation to itself, and the value of that. Also used so we could discern the hyper invisible but still discernible thing. The ancients cultivated everything around them, positive value needs progressions. They don't have to go far to find food. Nature showed them how to preserve food. Nature showed them how to make the depths of the ponds defensible for different kinds of species so a food chain would exist. How to keep the soil around the ponds and the bodies of water healthy so that we have that food source of worms walking into the and of more nutrition going down for the deeper worms to go deeper. Keep everything nice for the roots, loose, live networks of invisible but still discernible conjunctions to each self with that hyper self completing us, one value, no matter what, or that value is forced from here, leads of IDs in demonstration of the same thing. Slash S. Heaven and hell will more probably having been scientific values to teach this by hyper pantheism by the ancients. And it is an ism where and how it is a religion dependent as nature is upon the contemplation of individuals, upon the individuals to defend the order of the finite, where and how it can't be individual, the way or all together, or active volume, but being that and two other identities of relationship to itself at the same time. It would nature reveals, I'm not even a lawyer, nature reveals if there are five distinct identities of simultaneous nature, sequence nature being one of them distinctly, that show us they have a shared identity that is the hyper simultaneous, just as a scientific value, as means to discern. In other words, our species is not the only one this way, too. This one of the things, too. That's one of the things also constantly that these differences are. See, these differences, being an individual is a constant difference, and it is a variable difference simultaneously. And this comes with the course of a special difference, long replaced. Now one has grace, boxing. I teach us things. YouTuber Anthony Wall. Prepare. So they switch names at the branch. They lie about what they perceive. regarding people online with the descriptions of their behavior. And they value the real causes of negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures as descriptions of that and of people that where they direct them to respond to that. Because no, then they're using that to pretend they're directives to go after people because they're extremists. They have criminal foreign influence, fact, treatment, nature, quality aspects, nature's uses of that word roles. Extremism, for example, while simultaneously they have tactically delusions with that. Tactical delusions, not just delusions. And these are our formal logic experts. So they self value slash value the victim predators slash hyper victim hyper predators with migration problems, you know, as roles with insurrection, with readings of the law problems, well, pretending other while the breaching methods, remote uses of that problem. We have not one difference total as different as the course of that will and can, yet difference teach free speech.